Shogun Rua versus Paul Craig 2. The rematch takes place this weekend on the main card of UFC 255, Figueiredo versus Perez, and I'm looking forward to this light heavyweight bout. I need to know the answer. Who is better out of Paul Craig and Shogun Rua? Because the first fight left us with none of those answers. It ended in a draw. Some people thought that Shogun Rua won the fight. I can see that argument. Some people thought that Paul Craig won that fight. I could see the argument there as well. I thought there was no real clear winner. I didn't think it could be scored a draw, but it ended up being scored a draw. Whatever, let's move on and have the rematch. We know what Shogun Rua's like with his rematches and then trilogies on top of rematches, as he in his last performance took on Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, even though he's already beaten him twice, but the first fight was a close controversial decision. I understand, very similar to this situation as well, by the way. I think Paul Craig has a lot more to learn in this second fight coming in against Shogun Rua compared to Shogun Rua, because Shogun Rua is the older fighter here. I don't think he can add new tricks to his game the same way Paul Craig can. I think in the first fight, we saw Paul Craig, in my opinion, show that he can beat Shogun Rua. I didn't really see Shogun Rua show that he can beat Paul Craig. I saw him accept being given position on top of Paul Craig and not really doing anything whatsoever with it. And if that's how he won the first fight, I don't see him winning a second fight that way, because the UFC judges nowadays don't give a single fuck about ground control whatsoever. You can pass over half guard, you can pass over into full mount. The UFC judges don't give a fuck, and it annoys me. But that's how they score fights. I'm picking Paul Craig to win this one. I don't think he'll get it done off of his back. I think he'll win this one by TKO in the first or second round. He was on his way to doing that in the first fight. Almost TKO'd Shogun Rua in the first round, but got a little bit overconfident and caught on the chin. He had to slow things down a little bit. Then in the second round, he just accepted position on bottom, which was a really silly idea in my opinion. And in the third round, he literally did put himself on his back and ask Shogun to get on top. He shot a lousy takedown, which I don't even think was a takedown. I think it was an attempt at pulling guard into a better position for himself, because he shot a takedown, grabbed at the legs, didn't really drive through whatsoever, and just flopped to his back and watched Shogun climb on top of him. It was a very interesting move from Paul Craig. I don't know what his game plan was going into that first fight, but here's what I'm talking about here. He has more to learn. The first fight, the first round, if he doesn't get overconfident and overzealous and keep throwing too many retarded punches, I'll just say the word, it was retarded how he was throwing those punches, he could potentially get Shogun Rua out of there in the first round. He really could. If he takes his time, works on Shogun a little bit, he was doing very well before that exchange as well in the first round, landed some good body kicks, landed a good spinning back kick to the body as well. I think if he uses his range, picks apart Shogun from range, and I know he's got the same reach as Shogun Rua, but the leg distance is going to be a little bit different. Paul Craig has got some good kicks to the body. I think he can utilize them very well. And hey, Paul Craig, if you want to throw kicks, you opted to be on your back in the first fight. I'm sure you're going to be a-okay with throwing kicks against Shogun Rua, and I think kicks to the body are the best things to throw against Shogun right now, because he looks like a melted pudding. It doesn't look good. He looks like a little bit Vadoomish right now. He's not in peak condition. Those abs aren't going to be stopping raw shins hitting them, and I just don't see it happening. I don't see Shogun Rua being youthful enough to survive Paul Craig in this fight. I think he's going to lose by TKO, and I think it's just going to be a father of time situation, because he's 36 years of age. I don't even think he's 36 years of age. I think he's older than that, but I'll check right now. No, he's 38 years of age. I thought so. Don't see it happening for Paul. I don't see it happening. You're not going to beat Paul Craig at 38 years of age, especially after his last performance against Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, because I'll just say it. It was terrible. Some people thought Nogueira won that fight. I thought Shogun could have won that fight. I give him props there. But it was terrible. It was just watching two drunk old men fall around all over the place and make fools of themselves. And whilst we call ourselves the premier fighting organization in the world, I know that Shogun Rua still beats occasional guys in Jan Vellante, Corey Anderson, and it is embarrassing that he does that, and he beats Tyson Pedro as well. I just think that Paul Craig has way more to learn. He should not be going to his back in the fight like he did in the first fight here. I just don't see it happening. Paul Craig opted to go to his back in that first fight, and I have no idea why, because I think he could have easily won the fight. And I think, you know what, he thought he was so confident off of his back that maybe he could just pull guard and he knows he'll get a submission. The fact that he did not get a submission in the first fight tells me that maybe he's not going to opt to pull guard as much anymore. I think the only reason he was pulling guard against Shogun Rua in their first fight was because he liked his chances off of his back submitting Shogun Rua. I just don't see that happening here because, of course, in his first fight, he was coming off a win by submission. This next fight, he's coming off a win to Antigulov by submission off of his back. So maybe my plan will backfire and Paul Craig will like his chances even more off of his back. But I just feel like there's no need to go there. And I think if his coaches have a brain, they'll tell him, hey man, you don't need to pull you to your back whatsoever. You just get out there, take him down yourself. I know Shogun was very strong in the clinch in their first fight and was able to hold him against a cage. That's okay, Paul Craig. We're going to knee to the body. We're going to war of attrition this. We're not going to dive on our back and ask Shogun Rua to get on top of us and put ourselves in a disadvantaged position for the judges. That's just not going to happen. I feel like Paul Craig's going to get it done. And even if he is on his back this time, the judging will probably favour him and he'll know that as well, so I think he'll be active off of his back if it does end up there. But on the feet, I reckon he'll TKO Shogun Rua in the first or second round. I just don't see Shogun taking damage anymore. I really don't. He just doesn't look good. He looks very slow, and if Paul Craig doesn't win this one, the Bear Jew has really disappointed me. I'll be honest with you guys. I think this is a lock. I don't see a way that Shogun's going to evolve more than Paul Craig is for their rematch when Shogun's now 38 and Paul Craig is still in his prime somewhat, especially for the light heavyweight division. 32 years of age. I mean, Dominic Reyes is seen as a young up-and-comer and he's like 29. But still, Paul Craig is going to have learned way more. He's a much bigger guy. I think he'll get the job done. It's a dangerous one because Paul Craig has a knack for getting KO'd. We saw that against Alonzo Menifield. We saw that against Khalil Roundtree. We saw that against, let me check one more guy, I'm sure Tyson Pedro KO'd him in the first round and Shogun TKO'd Pedro in the third. But after that first fight, I know that Paul Craig is the only one that has to fix his mistakes. Shogun benefited from that first fight going the way that it did. Like the mistakes of Paul Craig gave Shogun a chance to make that fight close. If those mistakes don't happen and he doesn't get overconfident throwing punches against Shogun on the cage and he doesn't go for stupid techniques and then fall to his back after a failed takedown, he's a little bit more urgent in the grappling exchanges. I think that Paul Craig can make the adjustments to get the win, and if he does win, this is the biggest fight of his career. It really is, and this is the biggest fight of his career regardless if he wins or not, because if he wins this one, main card of a pay-per-view, this not normally would be a pay-per-view main card fight, but this pay-per-view, there's some exceptions to what is on the main card. I'm sure we can all agree it's a great pay-per-view, don't get me wrong, but still, there's not really this ain't making it on the main card of UFC 254. You know what I mean? Like, let's just, well, actually, no, hang on. Yes, it would. There was people making their fucking debuts on the main card of 254. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the standard of pay-per-view main cards has deteriorated recently. But what I will say is this. This ain't making it on the main card of UFC 249. I'm sure we can all agree on that. Maybe it will, though, because Shogun Rua seems to get great positions on cards, regardless how many times he embarrasses the promotion. So we'll look forward to it. I think Paul Craig's going to win. That's just all I got for you guys. You know what I mean? There's not much else to it. Shogun's taken more damage. He's now going to be a little bit older. Paul Craig's on a bit of a momentum spree right now. Of course, as far away removed from a KO loss as Paul Craig can be is better, in my opinion. I mean, he's gone 1-1 for his entire career. He came into the UFC, won his debut, then lost 2 in a row, then beat Magomed Ankalaev, of course. We all remember Elka Cliffy himself striking again. No Dagestani or Chechenian is safe. He's on every cliffside waiting for you. Loses to Jimmy Crute, but has a good fight against Jimmy Crute. Puts Jimmy Crute in some bad positions. I actually didn't mind his performance, but it just showed how good Jimmy Crute is. Kennedy Nzechukwu, come from behind triangle choke. Loses to Alonzo Menifield. Beats Vinicius Moreira. Draws to Shogun Rua. Now he's got another win. It feels like he's finally getting a little bit of momentum. This is the first time in his career that he's not had a win disrupted by a loss right afterwards. So I'm going to take that as a good sign that he's making the adjustments, and I think he'll get the job done against Shogun. And if he does win this one, biggest fight of his career, I want to see him versus maybe a Johnny Walker, maybe an Ankalaev rematch. That's exactly what I want to see, actually. If Paul Craig wins this one, can we try and make the Ankalaev rematch? Because as much as I like Paul Craig, and I like the way he speaks, I need to see an Ankalaev rematch. I need to see if Elka Cliffy can do the impossible twice. Because he did the impossible in the first fight. He was losing the first fight. It was a competitive enough fight, don't get me wrong, but Ankalaev was clearly winning, and in the third round, he really started to put things together. But Paul Craig got the job done, and I think for Ankalaev's career, his only loss on his resume is to Paul Craig. For his own career, I feel like it would be a great time after this one to make him versus Paul Craig again in a rematch. Because if Ankalaev doesn't get that fight now, then Paul Craig is probably going to get KO'd by another up-and-comer, and then we'll never get to see Ankalaev redeem that loss on his resume. And right now, with all the conversations about GOATs, I feel like legacies are so important. And I know if Ankalaev doesn't take that fight with Paul Craig, if he wins this weekend, now it's never going to happen, and he's always going to have that loss on his resume, and he's never going to be able to redeem himself, so I wouldn't even mind if they made that rematch. If they don't want to make the rematch, give Paul Craig maybe a rematch to Jimmy Crute, maybe a fight with Johnny Walker would be good as well, maybe a fight with Nikita Krylov. We'll see how it goes. I don't see the Krylov one happening. I think Krylov has earned a bit of a better opponent, but still, Paul Craig, gonna get it done. I'm rooting for him. Play the rules, you know what I mean? I'm really looking forward to it, man. I'm rooting for Paul Craig massively. I know he's my countryman, but I just like Paul Craig for some reason. There's just the myth of Elka Cliffy, the legend, the whispers on the mountainside of this legendary Elka Cliffy Dagestani killer that you just don't see coming. He's on every cliffside. Whispers of him murmur around the Dagestani communities. Elka Cliffy, Elka Cliffy, Elka Cliffy. And it's just, he's a legend over there. And it would be a very big shame not to see him make another run in that light heavyweight division and put himself in the best position he's ever been in on the rankings, right up there with the top guys. Looking forward to it. The light heavyweight division's right open right now, and I know that Paul Craig knows that as well, so he must be training as hard as he ever trained before. I don't think Shogun, that's the one thing you can't say about these older guys. Paul Craig, I know most likely, is training harder than he's ever trained before for this fight. Shogun physically can't do that. You know what I mean? Paul Craig, I would hazard a guess that in his mind, he's trained harder than ever before. Shogun Rua's body literally won't let him do that at this point in his career. I think he's going to be fading. He looked worse than he did in the Paul Craig fight in his next fight with Nogueira. I don't see it going any better this time. I don't see a second the second prime of the Brazilian. I may have made a fatal mistake. I forgot about the second prime of the Brazilian resurrection, proven by Glover Teixeira himself. The legend of the second resurrection. I'm going to go with Paul Craig, though, in all honesty. I think he gets the job done by TKO. Goodbye. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there, and see you later. And if Shogun loses, do him versus Nogueira 4, and then just end it, please, for fuck's sake. Goodbye.